So I guess go ahead then.
I guess we may as well start. Got quite a bit of material to cover here today, so I think we just go in order if we can. That has been said here in the agenda. We've the first one is the notes of Water Committee meeting held on June the 9th. Does anybody have any comments to make on any of those notes or any thoughts that they want to add to those? Okay, I guess on item 6, there's quite a number of questions that haven't been answered, and I was interested in that. I'm not sure that we talked about that, but that is an interesting list. But I guess the thing that strikes me about discussions that we're having now is that I think we need to focus in on exactly what the issue is that we're trying to achieve from the Water Committee point of view, that it's leading us off into many directions. And I think they're all interrelated, but they're also it's very confusing for the what exactly are we trying to come to grips with. And I think that from what I can see, this line of questions keeps coming back to the potable water system. And I don't think anybody in the Water Committee has any concerns that the potable water system is being operated properly. The qualified technicians are duly licensed to run it. And that's not the issue that we're trying to figure out. The Water Committees, basically, we have a dual system. We have firefighting needs of the system, and we have the potable water. And everything that we're trying to deal with is uppermost in our mind is that we can't affect the potable water quality of anything that we're going to recommend. So the difficulty that we've had is getting any kind of information or records as to how these decisions by the water operators are made. And that's, I think, the overall concern that we had. So that's why we tried to have whatever you want to call it, an operating manual, an SOP, standard operating procedure manual, whatever that is, to describe how a dual system, both fire and potable water, should be operated. So that's really the crux and the focus of where we're going on this operating manual. So when I look through all of the issues that are identified here, we see quite a bit of chlorination, optimizing the water level for fire protection. How do you do it? That's really the question. I guess what's the objective of the SOP manual? And of course, then we've got quite a bit of information on chlorine and chlorination, which we know and understand, and there's no issues with what is being said, other than the issues regarding spilling of water, because the spilling of water seems that it's confusing as to the reason for spilling water is because of low chlorine levels. but it does not appear to be low chlorine levels in the Tatlow tank. It's low chlorine levels at specific locations throughout the village of Belcarra. And I've looked through all the chlorine readings that have been made since the system came online in 2012. And the low levels of chlorine are coming from the lakes of Watson, St. Clair Road, and Coons Lane, which are dead end lines. And I think the top of Maine as well. So that's a separate issue than what we need to be considering for the levels of water in the Tatlow tank.
Okay,
Okay, so
okay. So I'll have to arrange for you to come in there in the morning.
Jim, you have to mute your overriding.
Don't worry about that. I'll talk to you in the morning. I'm gonna have to cut you short here. Okay, thanks.
okay, anyway, I don't know if anybody else wants to pipe in there, but that was the only thing I thought on the note part of it. We should try and just focus down on the how are we supposed to operate the water system in Belcarra as a dual system, not shift it always over to potable water.
If I can suggest, it would be good for Stuart to present to us the operation of a water system. There's some inconsistencies, and we'd just like to get our understanding up to par here.
I'm sorry, what was that, Martin?
Okay, I'm sorry. I would just in my opinion, I would like to hear from Stuart as to the operating of the water system. He's presented a short brief.
Yeah.
And also give more insight into the chlorination and how that affects the decision of the water levels in the Tatlow Reservoir. As Ian just pointed out, there's some confusing information.
Okay, do you want to wait until his
Sure.
comes up on the agenda?
Yeah, no, I was just responding to Ian's, who kind of finished with a question. So I believe Stuart's presentation may put things into context.
Okay, well, is there anybody else want anything on this first item, which is the summary of?
Yeah.
Jim, you had something?
Yeah, I think it might help if we go backwards a little bit to see what how much water we were using on day one, and see what the levels, the amount of water that's being used each year since, and relate that to the level in the tank. I think we should have that kind of information, because we obviously added more people each year. And I'd like to also know how much water we were dumping each year in relationship to the amount we're consuming. And see what the impact on the chlorination level is.
Okay, so if I could just say something here, I mentioned this last time, but we're up 45%, which is the biggest increase we've had since we started. We've had 10% increases per year. Last year we brought in, or 19, I guess, we brought in Belcarra Park, but that added like 2 or 3%. But all of a sudden we're up to 45% increase in water consumption. That's significant.
So is that not an adder for us, a good thing?
Well, it would certainly keep the chlorine levels adequate for sure, but it indicates a problem somewhere for sure.
Well,
unless there's,
what problems does, like, when we first started the system back in 2012, what level did we set the tanks at?
We'd have to bring a report on that, I think.
I'm just curious, maybe I'm out of line here, that all this is irrelevant, but I'm not a chemist. But the fact is, I think that there's some relationship. We're putting in, buying so much water, and we're theoretically dumping so much water. Do we know how much on a regular basis to compare it to the chlorine levels, or is there any relationship?
It's all data that can be produced. It's just it's not being presented.
yeah, we need the,
Okay, I've noted it. Mhm.
It would probably help to be really clear as to exactly what data is being sought. So it seems to me that could be pulled out of our annual reports.
I just did
Makes
that, so I've got the data, but I don't have the set points. My understanding is that the initial setting given to Belcarra by the design engineer was they started at 50%. Now, I don't know what they did after that to go higher. But obviously the tank was at one point set and operated at a much higher level. As a matter of fact, the initial design of the was for the Tatlow tank to get an extra ring. So we would have had more water in the Tatlow tank, but they couldn't do that because of the seismic situation. So now we're running at a lower level. And
Sorry, Stuart has his hand up. I don't know if you can see that or
electronically or physically, I can't see.
electronically, yeah.
Oh, I don't have that thing, do I?
No, Stuart, you have to just raise your hand regularly.
Okay, Stuart, thanks.
I just wanted to respond to what your records may indicate, or what you have come to understand versus everything, all the research that I've done with the data that I have versus talking with the water operators. The minimum water level has never been changed since inception at 60%. You have to change that manually, and we get because it's an altitude valve. So it's kind of a mechanical device where you actually have to get in there and adjust it manually. And none of the operators have ever adjusted it manually or changed the setting. The setting has only been serviced by a technician, a qualified technician for those valves. And the valve setting has never been changed.
Stuart, can I just follow up on that just so we're clear? That setting, which started with the tank when it was first put into use for this, has always been at 60%, but later a second remotely controllable valve was added, and that one may have been higher, but the original valve, which would end up as a fallback if the new one didn't work or wasn't triggered or was set below it, was always at 60%. Is that correct?
It's correct that we have installed, from Opus installed, an electrically actuated valve that we can control by our SCADA. Uses solenoids where we can adjust the tank setting if we want, or on mandatory times when there's any kind of fire emergency. That setting, once again, there were two objectives with the design of that, which you well know. One was to be able to activate and put on the tank fill at the time of a fire emergency. Mm-hmm. And the other one was for the potential of upping the minimum water level of the tank, which, once again, to all the data, has never been used, and it mostly relates to the operation for the potable water supply, and the fact that you need a flushing you do need a certain amount of flushing in order to keep the water from going stale. I guess we could probably go into that later, but that is the reason why it has never been moved. And because it needs, essentially, we look to permission from Fraser Health in order to bump the system up. And to bump the system up by 10% is far beyond the level of control that you're kind of giving up that control of being able to monitor the water level. So that's the reason why with this report, what was acceptable by the water operators was written within that report.
Okay, I mean,
Right.
sorry, I don't want to interrupt the session, but I was just wanting to deal with the issue that there was an additional remote capability. I think we've moved into another topic, but just the remote capabilities you're describing, the one thing I've learned there that I wasn't aware, that you're saying we never in fact have set that second valve such that we had a higher refill trigger point.
Not to my knowledge, no. And not to Brad. Brad is the one that's got the long-term history of it. And he is adamant that it's never been adjusted upwards.
So, okay, that surprises me, but okay, good. Facts are useful.
Ian, did you catch me? I don't know if other people have their hand up, but I have a follow-up question if I could, please.
Okay, go ahead.
So, Stuart, thank you for that piece. I mean, the part for me is you referred to the water operators since that time and a technician, right? And so the technician is never adjusted, and we understand that, and that person was spoken with, or that company, or we've got records that reflect that.
We have, well, since I've been in, we have records of the technician being in once.
Yep.
I would have to do some research to find previous site visits from that technician.
Okay, because here's my piece. I think it's really valuable at some point for us to know what's happened before. But the water operators I'm aware of go beyond Brad, right? So they include Doug. So did we talk to Doug?
All my findings are, once again, we discuss water operations every single day. And we also did that when Doug was here, yes, and he agreed and confirmed with that information.
Okay, so actually, when you said Brad, you actually spoke to Doug and Brad, and that would confirm that there were no changes from those two, right?
That is correct.
Okay, all right, okay, thanks. Thanks, Ian.
Okay.
Are you suggesting that possibly we would need a chlorination system for that tank to raise the level? A rechlorination system?
Permission to speak, is that for me?
Sorry, that's you. Sorry, Jamie.
So once again, through discussions with the water operators, we came up with that plan, which I undoubtedly am aware that it's probably not to the satisfaction of the water committee. Having said that, a chlorination system solves the problems of any contaminants building up within that tank.
Okay, Martin?
It comes back to the question, like, is there any testing directly at the tank, or is it only at road ends? If you can clarify that, please. Stuart.
We have a chlorometer that we just got calibrated this year, and we've been getting readings from that all along. Yes, so there's a chlorometer chlorometer, I should say, that is in the pump station.
But, okay, is there? Yeah, okay, so from what I understand, there's no customized adjustments made throughout the year. It's just these preset points of a 63% or whatever it is, a low point, and there's the high point at 80 something. And it's just monitored and samples are taken at various locations. But has bacteria levels or low chlorination levels in the tank ever been an issue? Or is it only at the road ends?
The chlorination and the bacteria levels are satisfactory, very satisfactory. They're always going to be better than what the readings that you're going to have at the distal branch lines. The issue is that you cannot bump up the water level to the point that you see the readings change. If they start to change, it's already too late, because you're talking about a large volume of water that's systemic, distributed throughout the village. And so when you are getting readings at the branch lines at the very end, to the qualifications of the water operators, pretty well the only avenue of cleaning the system is by flushing the system. However, if you start to get bad readings at the tank, the whole system becomes systemically contaminated, and you're dealing with a disruption to the residents for drinking water for an extended period of time, because the system may need hyperchlorination. It may be, it may have to be completely drained. There's all sorts of scenarios.
Okay, no, okay, agreed. I understand that, and you don't you want to be proactive rather than like reactive in these with potable water. So then it comes back to the question, the low level. I mean, I saw the proposition of increasing it 2%, which appears to be a prudent, and do it gradually and do the testing. However, I come back to the question. I understand the issue of circulation of water in the Tatlow tank, but has there been any discussions with Fraser Health as to the setting of that low level? Because then obviously we question, why was it set at that level to begin with? It may have been for some other reasons. And so that low level, I mean, the proposition of increasing 10% a year hasn't been discussed with Fraser Health as a gradual measure to take, or is it just a proposition that's being put forward by the operators?
We have a meeting coming up with Fraser Health to go over the water report, and we could certainly discuss that with them at that time.
But my question is, the proposition, is it one that's done with the operators or already with some insight from Fraser Health?
I just keep seeing the mayor's putting his hand up. That's why.
You go. I'm putting my hand up after.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
So
Thanks.
once again, my first meeting with Fraser Health is going to be this year. Last year, it was canceled due to COVID. However, every single year, they do have a meeting, and every single year there are issues brought up, and they go over our statistics and our data, and questions are asked, and answers are given. So I look forward to the meeting shortly.
Okay, no, okay, I'll just finish. Sorry, Jamie. That's good to have that discussion with Fraser Health, especially if you bring up the topic is can we adjust this low level setting, and what are the guidelines or recommendations that you give? Okay.
So Ian,
Yeah,
I just wanted to add to that because we're kind of moving and probably properly into the report that Stuart did. So I'll start off with, I'm really pleased that the report's there, Stuart. I'm really pleased that it's written. And I think it offers a piece. I understood it to be, and it's not a problem, but I understood it to be a proposition that you had written the report in concert with our water operators or water operator. I wasn't sure on that, but you've clarified that, so I appreciate that. And there's a proposition in there that I think actually is a foundation for, and Martin was getting at it too, like if this is a discussion so far from our group of people who are qualified, are talented, have longevity of service, right? That's a good thing, but I mean, having something written on paper allows us to pose to Fraser Health, like Stuart, you said this is quite a minimal amount, but Fraser Health may look at it and say one of anything, but I believe we should pursue. Could we do it in a in a quicker fashion, but not as dramatic that was put out the other night? Or in fact, is what's on paper right now too dramatic? But I mean, Fraser Health, as I understand from everything, they are kind of our masters. We need to be able to respond to them. So, but I do think that in the end, they're going to offer something that will help add to what our whatever allotment we have of operators right now. So I think Martin's point about, you know, it may be a good piece to start with. And it sounds like Fraser Health, this is the first time we're going to talk to them. So that's positive. So thanks.
And Ian, Jim has his hand up.
Yeah, I see that.
And thank
I
you.
just wanted to comment that, does Fraser Health understand that we've got a dual system? They focus on the potable water and so are we, but we are also trying to make sure that somehow there's more water for firefighting, which is unlike probably most systems. I don't know.
Fraser Health concentrates on the water quality only and the drinking water distribution system. And once again, that's what our licenses are provided for. And that, even though, and I fully understand the need and the desire to come up with a plan that will address additional water for firefighting, it's always going to be the drinking water supply first and foremost that needs to be protected according to the act and according to our the guidance of our licenses.
Yeah, I'm fully aware of that and I understand that, but this is the complexity of our system that somehow we need to, if we'd have built a bigger tank at the beginning, would we still be down at this low level of water in the Tatlow tank?
Well, it'd be going
I saw Chris had his hand up as.
Yeah, sorry, two things. So one thing, Fraser, like Stuart just said about, do they know if we have a dual system? Perfectly frank, nearly every single water system is a dual system. So Fraser Health would consider that it would be more or less a given. You'd be a very rare circumstance where you just had a system which wasn't a water system, a potable water system and a fire system. So that's one clarification. And in regards to the last comment you just made about the reservoir, yeah, if this thing was sized differently for fire flows, you just have a different setup. You would have had a larger reservoir with probably some kind of injection chlorination system at the back end of it as well, with some other tweaks. That would be the difference if you sized it differently for fire flows.
Okay. Jim, you mentioned?
One question that Stuart, did the health department suggest to you to deal with it at 2%?
0.2%, is it not?
Pardon?
No, it's 2.
Should be 2%
Two.
in there. That is through discussion of with the other water operators on a plan that they would feel could be successful.
So the health department didn't suggest use 2%.
No, sir.
Okay, I'm curious about that because 2% feels to me like with the lack of information that we have over the last 8 years or whatever, I don't imagine we've got enough information to deal with anything at a 2% level. It's too broad.
If I may speak just a little bit further on that, you know, because we're kind of starting to, the report is involved in this anyways, no matter what. So I might as well speak a little bit towards that. And as soon as, you know, right at the beginning of the year, actually, as soon as I started managing this system, I started looking at the files. I started looking at our strengths and our weaknesses, our deficiencies. By the starting of this year, I started doing additional water sampling as well as servicing the water meter boxes and taking recordings. I won't be doing any changes. This is a proposed change that I will not do any changes until I get until it satisfies the Fraser Health Authority. So in other words, I'm going to be bringing this forward. I'm going to be showing the data that we have thus far. I'm going to be proposing what we, the parameters that we're giving as an initial kind of template. I'm going to be asking whether, in their opinion, you know, things can be at different levels. And then all I can do is move forward from their recommendations based on the discussion that we have.
Well, do they get involved in such a thing as how much water to dump every day or whatever?
They get involved with engineering of any planned system type changes and or potential operational type changes. So they may or may not have intimate knowledge of our system. They will listen to our plan and see if it's safe enough to alter.
Well, are we talking about information that should really be coming through a qualified engineer to be in direction? I mean, one thing to is to operate the system is enough, or another thing to design the system. Are we not overlapping here somewhere?
Well, in a way we are changing the way the system was originally designed. And of course, there was another change in the system to add those solenoids. However, in that report, there was absolutely nothing mentioned about chlorination levels. And that's why when you talk about my report and you look at my report, when I was talking about opinion, I put those opinions there, and hopefully maybe the engineers can kind of talk further on that about the water pressure. Even if we pump that tank up to 95%, and incidentally, no matter what the reading is on our SCADA system, that water level is going up to the float valve. That's where it hits. It hits that float valve, and then it starts going down. So that's really the maximum level, no matter what. Having said that, if it was all the way out to the top for a short period of time, you're still running at a deficiency of water pressure in some areas of the municipality, like St. Clair, for example, where there's 37 to 40 PSI. So what happens when you have the fire trucks going down there, and 37 PSI will give you about 20 liters per second. And so if you're pumping 60 liters per second, you're instantly at a negative residual, and there's just not enough water. Even if the tank is full, it's not pumping enough water there, because their draw is going to be in excess of 60 liters. The monitor, the top monitor itself, usually those are set at 1,000 GPM or 1,200 GPM. So in excess of 60 liters per second just for the monitor alone.
Well,
You got
I-
something?
I'm not
Doug,
sure about the relationship on pressure and chlorine.
Can I make a comment there?
Doug, I think, yeah.
Okay, we've already had a fire on St. Clair. And from, as far as I know, and I was there was no issue with pressure. There was no issue with getting enough water. That, I don't want to say it's a red herring, but I think that, you might want to talk to Jay or the fire chief about that, but my recollection was there was never any issue with enough pressure. And we had two trucks there, so we were drying off two separate fire hydrants, I believe. So just a comment.
Okay, Martin, you had a comment?
Well, unless I think maybe Bruce was ahead of me, so I'll let Bruce.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, it's a very useful discussion. I just want to be clear that I've understood the exchange thus far, and I'm really directing this through the chair. So Fraser Health, and I take it the point that Chris made, Fraser Health is aware that most systems are serving a dual purpose. Fraser Health does get involved in considering engineering related changes, but Fraser Health has not been contacted at all at this point by our village with respect to a concern to increase firefighting capability. Is that a fair statement, Stuart? As far as you're concerned, as far as you know?
Once again, I'll be talking with Fraser Health on, I think it is July 8th or 9th, and I haven't discussed this with them.
Okay, so this is new to them, and so what you might do is take this proposal you put together to them and explain why, and we're then going to determine whether they are or are not concerned, and what cautions they may or may not introduce as a result of that. Is that fair?
Yes, it's fair to say that I'm going to be exploring as many details of not only this, but with other questions as well.
Sure.
I hope to have a very, very positive feedback from Fraser Health.
Yeah, that's good. And then just a final point on this issue. I mean, I think pressure in the system, obviously it's important, and we do know, I mean, when we look at different areas in the village, there will be different pressures, and that may well be an issue, but I don't think it's an issue right now, because I mean, I think our options are fairly limited as to what we can do, and I'm not sure how we can change pressure in various parts of the community, but that strikes me as a separate concern and perhaps a longer term concern.
Yeah. Okay, Martin?
Yeah, well, I know it's like, as you know, I've been talking about the pressure for 2 years now. And it's definitely a concern on the whole northern part of Belcarra. If the objective is to increase the fire flows, then that low pressure needs to be dealt with. It's the lowest flow rates we have in the system. And it's not only St. Clair. I barely have 40 PSI at my place, for example. It's from Kelly Road, like right to the end. So if you check the like the hydrant pressures at various locations, anyways, it's what I saw, and I've measured the pressure at my place. I know it's 40 PSI, and I discussed it with Bernie several years ago that he was aware of the low pressure readings. So it's no matter what, if we want to increase the fire flows, there has to be booster pumps or a higher elevation tank. It's nothing more than that. And I've been concerned that there's been no discussions on this whatsoever. You can increase all your inflow as you want, you will still have very limited fire flows at our end of the village. Now, the second thing is on the low level setting, we have to understand also that when the low level setting was originally set, I'm not sure what was considered, whether it was a recirculation rule of thumb of the tank or so on, but you have to understand that our daily consumption has increased by several fold since it's more than doubled in the last like 10 years. And so whatever set you had at the start is you don't have that same recirculation now. We had maybe 1 liter per second 10 years ago, and we're up to a maximum of over 5 now. So it's significant. So that low level should normally be adjusted as our consumption is trending upwards.
Okay, Stuart?
Yeah, I just wanted to concur with that because you're right. The more water that we use, the better the it's not just chlorine, it's all the residuals as well, right? But the better the readings are. And I also wanted to thank you for the comments about the water pressure, because once again, until you deal with that, you're only dealing with a portion of the municipality. So, if you're concentrating on raising the tank level and just focused in on that, you're only dealing with a portion of the municipality. You're not dealing with the inherent problems that can be corrected by pump stations and elevated water reservoir.
Okay. All right, I guess I'd like to move on if we could. I think probably that was a good discussion, but we're kind of halfway in the middle of, well, Stuart's report, but if I could go back to item 3 with Chris's report, if we could discuss that. Start with Chris. Because
Yeah, I suppose. Do you have any questions on the memo that was sent there? I try to make it as plain English as possible. I mean, in reality, I think, reviewing the act and what have you, I think it's, in my opinion, pretty clear that no one other than a qualified water operator should have access to the system, which includes SCADA, which would open up a valve. So, but that's my professional opinion on that. Welcome any questions on it.
If I can, I'll just agree with Chris, but it's not only on the certifications, but also it's only the operators which know the status of the system at any time. And there may be a valve malfunction. There may be other issues with the water supply system. So you do not want any external party to start tweaking around and touching the system. It has to remain within the control of the certified operators.
okay, I guess this is in fact information that's brought forward as a result of Bruce and the last council meeting asking for procedure to ensure that in the situation of a fire, that the button is pushed to have water start to flow into the Tatlow tank. And how you go about getting this 100% assurance of it being completed. So I think that was the overall focus of this. And surely I guess there were just ideas being thrown out, and this pretty well confirms, okay, we've got water operators. I believe we've got 3 that are there. I looked in the 2020 drinking water report, and down at item 7, I think you've got your what do they call them? Duty officers assigned. That strikes me that all of the discussion we're having is, do we have a written document to describe this duty officer program or function. And that's what I think very clearly, to my mind, answer back to council would be, here you've got 3 designated persons that, and one is a duty officer. I believe they're on for a week. And so then council would want to know, okay, how do we know that on the call out, this duty officer pushed the button and started water flowing in? It's quite as simple as that, I would assume. And possibly you could have a text message fan out that it was done. And that would close the loop and give the assurances that that council's looking for. Stuart, you had a comment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can give you a brief description of how the call out works. First of all, you're right, there is a person assigned every single Monday, and that is scheduled onto our calendar. We change the emergency, or not the emergency call out, but at the same time, we change our phone for off-duty hours to that person's phone number. We are paid and assigned for the off-duty hours, so they're obligated to be responding because we pay that wage. We have the app I Am Responding on our phones, as well as we get the text. So we kind of get 2 different alarm signals when a call comes out. The person on duty will check out their phone, and if it's anything fire related, anything not a confirmed, even if it's potential, the first thing that we are expected to do is open up the tank valve. At the same time, all of the operators actually do monitor it, because we all get the tone coming out, so it's almost impossible not to monitor it. So there is a little bit of a redundancy there. As far as actual putting it into our emergency plans, we're constantly working on the emergency plans, and you know, hopefully with discussions with Chris as he's doing all the operational procedures, that will be entered into his new book. And oh yeah, one last thing, we do have a portable radio. So as soon as we activate the tank fill, we will contact command or the chief, whomever is active on the call, to state what the water level is. I'm just in discussions about that, just because radio frequency is a little bit not as consistent. I would like to get us to be using phones for that, but we have to have command on scene using phones. So once they have phones, then I can completely drop the radios, and we'll be able to talk to them via phone call.
Okay. That's an excellent description of the system. And I guess my point is that in a standard operating procedure, that would all be written down, which I don't know if it is or not, but I would expect that that's the kind of response that council would be looking for, to assure them that concern that they have, that the operator did in fact activate the water coming in. Because we are running a balancing act. That so-called 15 minutes response time gives us you know, a fair amount of water, up to say 18,000 liters in a 15-minute time. So every minute is critical to getting more water into the tank in a fire call situation. So that's why this SOP manual that is being written, this I would assume would be the first SOP or document or whatever you want to call it, that goes to council and gets their approval, that's what they're expecting. That's what they're asking you for.
So Ian, you have 3 hands up. Bruce, did you want to go first or do you want me to come
Yep.
in on this one?
Uh,
You wanna go? You're welcome to go.
Yeah, I'd like to go first if I
good.
can. Yeah, first. Yeah, Stuart, thank you for the description. We do have to have this in writing, in my opinion. It needs to be let me just back up one step. Because it's the same point that Ian made at the beginning of this. I mean, our manuals, and obviously with this committee, our manuals need to reflect the fact that it's a dual system. And we need to have our procedures laid out in there that have to do with firefighting. They may not be complicated. There may not be a lot of them. There's a handful. But we do need to have them reflected within the manual putting together because it impacts what we're expecting our qualified staff to do. So I certainly think this is one of those. Ian is completely correct that the issue here is being certain that that early triggering of water is in fact taking place. And if we have it documented and we clarify who has responsibility for that, and we know that it's happened, that we can show that it's happened in the cases where we need it, I think that would satisfy council. What makes me really uncomfortable is having walked away from some other discussions, believing something was the case, and I'll just back up to the setting of the low setting on the tank. Because my understanding was all of council was of the view that we'd set a higher minimum level. To learn that that was never changed causes me to be very committed to having these kind of reports in writing. Oral assurances just don't make me very confident at this point. So I'm sure we're doing it. I just think we need to document it and we need to know who has responsibility for it. And I just asked one question. You said there was some redundancy. Do others back? I would take it from what you're describing, Stuart. There's only one person on duty. It's their job to trigger the inflow in the event they conclude that this is a fire-related call out. But there is no backup to that, I take it, or if there is, it's purely coincidental, accidental that somebody bothers to check.
Well, once again, there's one person that is quote unquote on duty.
Right.
All the information comes through on all of the operators' phones.
Right.
Say even if it's Brad, call the senior employee, he will still phone me and I will still be always watching. So I won't interfere with what's going on because I can actually see him manipulating the SCADA. I can see him changing everything on our SCADA system. And then he'll phone me and confirm. So right now, that's what we do. That's why I call it a redundancy because everybody is watching. I end up, if I didn't get a call from Brad, I would be calling him.
Okay, but again, I take it none of this is in writing.
No, once again, there's always improvements that we're doing. I've got a long list of items that we're starting to take on, including, like I said, with the water meter boxes and all sorts of other things. So we're improving what we're doing constantly, and things will change, get better for that.
Okay, but we don't have anything in writing, I guess was my point, and I think Ian made it. So one thing I think we do need to do, we do need to document this process, and it needs to go into our manual. I mean, I don't doubt people are doing the right thing. We need to have a documented process that clearly points out what responsibilities are. Can you tell me, do you have any way of knowing, I mean, when we've had this practice, can we show that in fact we have always triggered that valve since we started this process, or do you have any way of knowing?
No, actually, the documentation, once again, so if the system is done properly and it's reported via radio waves, that should actually be documented onto dispatch recording system. So all communications on the radio do get recorded. So if there was any kind of a lawsuit or something, the first thing they would probably be doing is listening to the recording.
Okay, I'm less worried about lawsuits than ensuring we have the maximum fire flow, but I take your point. So you would be confident that if you had to go back into that, you'd have every reason to believe we have always triggered input whenever we've had a call out since we started this process?
Well, I'm not going to speak for, before my time.
Right.
I just don't want to put myself in a spot and try to speak for how things were done previously. The last time it was opened up was at the call. There was a potential fire at one of the cabins. There was that ended up being nothing. That was the last time we opened up the tank fill for a call.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That finishes my questions for the moment. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Bruce, and I really appreciate that. And Stuart, again, I want to thank you because you've kind of given some complete and full answers, but I want to provide some clarity for the whole group. And I've spoken to Lorna about this, but I also want to speak very openly and very clearly. It is a very useful proposition here. We're looking at a situation where we can move forward, and we're not looking at a situation moving back that involves a lawsuit or worse, an injury or loss of life. So as of going forward, this responsibility is Chris Boyd's. I've talked to Lorna. I want this to go immediately to council. It doesn't take long to go through. Stuart has that process. Chris, I've talked to Lorna. So our expectation on council, this will be captured on paper. It's the first one coming forward, and it needs to come so that there is confidence by our council and by our community that not only do we have a good oral process, but we have a good written down process. And I want to tell you from working with these, just a few quick things. Stuart, you talked about there's always things that can be improved. Absolutely, they can be. If they're never captured in writing, if they're never scrutinized, if they're never examined, they won't improve, or the chances will be not a good likelihood. So I want to be very, very, very clear. Chris, and if there's any doubt, you and I and Lorna can talk, or if you want to bring it up here, but this needs to get to council, and it needs to be the first one that goes. And then I want to talk about what it will be eventually. Eventually, and I would say we've got incredible water operators, and the redundancy that Stuart has talked about, where he's in on that call, he's doing things. Those are good pieces. Maybe they should be captured in as backup, and that's appropriate. But it is important that at some point, once we get that process down, the expectation for all our employees will move from expectation, once it's shared with them, once it's clear with them, once they've had a chance to respond, if they think there's fragile part, it will become, and I say this very, very carefully, with our people, it will become essentially something they will do, but it will also be a direction. It will be something that is clearly captured on paper. And the benefit is it's what they're doing right now, or with some addition, and then it will become something that is part of their job and part that everybody is accountable for. Okay? Clarity on that?
Okay.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Thoughts?
What is it exactly you want me to send back to council?
Well, I'll tell you what.
So just, I understand you want the procedure,
Yes.
but what is it you want?
Well,
Write out the procedure and put it in a report and send it back to you?
Well, what I would say, and I think you heard from a couple people on this, and that standard operating procedure that you're putting together,
Yeah.
the first item should be this, right? So the first one, you're gonna, like, you've got this coming on July 15th, right? And I think it probably needs to be adjusted because Stuart's, we've got a meeting, I believe, coming up. It's the 19th, correct, Lorna?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so we've got to adjust it because that's the last time that we can get that to council. But so the full standard operating procedure needs to come then. The one right now, we just need to get as quickly as can, because I mean, this is a critical feature for us. and we're lucky we're dealing on it on a going forward basis. Okay, does that make sense, Chris?
Sure, like I can write that procedure up. That's fine. No problem. Like I talk with Stuart and get it written up and put into the standard operating procedure. But
Yeah, and so here's my senses, but you decide, but I'll ask the question. When we're finding out what we do right now, in addition to Stuart, you may talk to them about working with the people that currently are doing that each and every time. And right now, it sounds like it, you talked to Stuart, but there's also, I believe Brad would be in that linkage, right? I think it's important we capture what it is right now. And if there's some fragility to that, we make some immediate recommendations. Make some sense?
yeah, like so just so I'm 100% clear here, like we're bringing forward the SOP document for operations so they understand how to use the system, correct? Or am I writing this SOP for this committee? Because they're two very different things.
So I think that what I will say right now, after what you've heard from people, if you need some more discussion on it, let's you, Lorna, and I talk.
Sure.
Okay, what's real clear, and it isn't the committee just saying it, it's people. Stuart's not on the committee. He's staff. He's talking about doing things, getting them written down and moving forward. So I don't, you know, I mean, if you want to pursue this right now, but I just think we need to be moving forward. It's pretty clear we need a written piece, and it's pretty clear that we need to know, like, wouldn't you want to know what our people currently are doing? Because wouldn't that help if you see some positive things that maybe should be adjusted, right?
No, I don't want to get into an argument. I don't mean to be divisive here, but an SOP document is written and used by operators who operate the system and use it. They're not written for the public to understand the system. They're two different things. Like so that's why I'm kind of struggling a little bit. It's like when I write this SOP document, it's for an operator like Stuart. I'm not writing it for the public to understand that we're doing something like.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, work with Lorna, bring what you can, but here's my piece. I think the public's going to understand that if there's nothing written down about our current process, stepping away from our people doing it, that would need to be done. So why don't we leave it at that, Chris?
Sure.
I wonder if I could just say, I'm a little sympathetic to the situation Chris is finding himself in, because basically this is a procedure that village staff know. It's not really an engineering issue. This is just a procedure to make sure that one of the village staff is in fact online to do this, push the button in the case of a fire call. So I guess I sympathize with Chris's situation, because I'm not sure, you know, that the description of how to write this thing is all in Stuart. He just described it to us perfectly, that of what it's going to be looking like.
So let me respond to that, Ian, if I can. So here's the piece for me. This was a motion that came from council, correct?
Yep.
Okay,
Right.
and I believe you, Lauren, as their chief administrative officer,
Yep.
talked to people about who was doing it. They're like, this is my understanding, we have an employee and we have a consultant. We do not have a barrier or a wall between the two of them. And my sense is, I would just see that we need an outcome. And if people, I actually would see it as tremendously positive.
Yeah.
People are talking to figure it out, but I guess what I'm struggling right now is there's an urgency to this.
Yeah, I know. That's
Yeah,
right.
so Lorna, there's no prohibition for Chris and Stuart to talk together or work together on
Oh,
this?
no, they do. Yes,
Yeah,
they do frequently. Mhm.
yeah, that was my understanding. I found that as quite positive. So I'm actually looking for outcome based, but I do note that in the organizations I work with, when people have something attached to their name, they have carriage for it. Doesn't mean they don't work with other people to build it. So anyways, we'll go from there.
Okay, I just want to bring one final thing up. Are you intending to put this SOP out to the public?
No, well, let's go back to Bruce because I think Bruce passed these motions and he raised the question that he does not know whether it's written down or what happens. And he alluded to another question. So, you know, if you were to pick the most important one, like we don't need, if there's technicality, oh, go ahead, Bruce, you go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, Ken, Chris, I appreciate the question you're asking. In my mind, as a council member, I would be quite happy to see this come back as within our standard operating procedure, portions of which would be public, portions of which you would not make public. But a member of the public or this committee, for example, would be able to see, all right, here is the structure of our water system. Here's its rationale. Here's what it's intended to do. And there, I think we do need a section that says this, you know, carries out two functions, because I haven't seen anything yet that says firefighting is a consideration. It's not dominant. It can't jeopardize water quality, but it needs to be noted, in my opinion. And then we could have a number of procedures that relate to that. I appreciate that some of this you may not want to make public, but at least, I mean, a description that we trigger inflow, that's fair. That's a public issue, and I don't mind whether it's personally, whether it's in the operating procedures, or whether it's an attachment to them. You could have, you know, the administration can write operating procedures for the village. It doesn't matter to me as long as it's referenced and as long as it's in writing. I don't know if that helps. So I think either you, as Jamie said, you and or Stuart can do that modification. And insofar as it being a motion of council and coming back to council, the critical issue is to satisfy council and any reasonable person participating that we have a very robust process that ensures that water triggering happens. I take your point, Chris, that you know, you're very, very careful about who you allow to have an impact on your water system. That's fine, but the issue is ensuring that we are at 99.9% probability of triggering inflow, given, you know, the relatively low amount of water we have in our tank. Again, I don't know if that helps you. I guess the one thing I think we should do is we should reflect in the operating procedure an introduction on the system. It doesn't have to be long, but it should note that it carries out two functions, and you know, and then who is the accountable party with respect to water quality and domestic supply. And obviously there are a number of regulatory things we have to measure there. I appreciate operating staff don't have to memorize that, but in a 1 or 2 page introduction, one can cover all that.
Yeah, so maybe I can just kind of wrap this up to some degree. Maybe I don't want to avoid anything else. I get this is a politically sensitive issue, and you want to show that that as council and staff are doing the right
Sorry,
thing.
Chris, you're hard to hear.
Oh,
And you're breaking up a little bit.
any better? Yeah.
Yeah, clear.
So I understand, you know, this is obviously a politically sensitive issue that we're kind of talking about. You know, people are worried, that, you know, about fire flows and what have you in the village. And so what you're really looking for is a report coming back to say that as a committee and as staff, we've talked about it, there is a procedure in place and a comprehensive procedure in place that we're satisfied with. Or do you want me to write out the whole procedure and give it to the public?
Well, Stuart, I think Stuart just described the procedure. If we had an operating procedure that laid out what happened when there was a fire call in layman's terms, that's fine. I mean, you may want in a more detailed issue for staff, I guess, to lay out some of the details as to how that system works, but I would just think that's standard training. Our problem is, and look, I'm not trying to read anything into the committee's experience. They can speak for themselves. But the problem is we do not have a paper trail for a lot of this. And I simply think now, we're moving forward, let's have a paper trail that lays out that we recognize this system has two functions, that we recognize our water supply and possibly our pressure is not optimal for what we're trying to do with it. And we do what we can with the resources we have in front of us. And that would be adequate in my mind in terms of an introduction. Then as far as the procedure is concerned, it sounds to me like Stuart could write that up in a day.
Okay.
Okay, is there any other discussion on that point then? Is it clear what this is supposed to describe? Jim?
No, I wanted to get on to something else for a moment.
Let's finish this one. Martin, do you have anything on this?
Yeah, if I can propose, I find, so like Jamie, I find this deadline somewhat, it's very optimistic, but there's a certain level of ambiguity as to what the document should contain. And as Chris indicated, who's the target audience here? And it's not evident. So I would probably suggest that we go about it, or Chris goes about it in a progressive fashion. So starting out with a table of contents, as he's already done, he can tweak it, and then having a first draft, second draft, rather than just saying we need it for July 16th. It's like, it needs to be carefully done.
Yeah, so I don't disagree with that, but this has been on the table for a while, and council asked for one specific item for coming up. There are two, and one of them, like the part that Bruce has spoken to, like, we need to move from the fact we've got an oral process, we've got one written. So anyway, I'll leave it with Lorna to work with staff and consultant on that. But, Bruce, if I'm not mistaken, council looking for a key piece on what happened to be moved from oral into written.
Yeah, yes, and obviously at the end of the day, insofar as those areas it's responsible for, council will make a decision. I think council will be perfectly satisfied with a written explanation of what the process is, and assurance that we ought not to worry about it not being triggered. And third, the point that Chris makes, and I trust everybody who we are allowing to trigger inflow is a qualified water operator.
Yeah, well, there's no disagreement on that, right? I mean, that potable water is the key piece, but just, so Martin, I don't, certainly Lorna can have those comments and work. We have one staff and one consultant working on two separate ones. Are welcome to cross over if they need to do something, but I'm just signaling that council wants to see that what happens right now in a written process. And I talked about the need to bump it up because Lorna will need it ahead of the second meeting. And if the whole operating manual isn't done, then that's fine. Lorna can talk and work on that. But that one feature, I believe, and Bruce, you correct me if I'm wrong, council expects to see that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Hey, little bit.
Can I just clarify on Martin's point? I think in my mind, Martin, you were talking about the other SOP procedural manual as opposed to this one here, which is only specific to the operator activating the infill on the situation of a fire call. That's the SOP we're talking about, I think, right? No?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the one that Jamie, you're referring to as wanting it urgently.
Yes.
Okay.
You just dropped with me. So we were talking about, when I think about the SOP, this is a part of the SOP, right? This written procedure. But it sounds to me like you guys are talking about this is a separate procedure. This is just one procedure, and then there's going to be another SOP document as well. Is that correct?
My understanding right now is that this is an SOP, that whatever you want to call it, it's a procedure that describes the operator. Stuart, am I hitting the right terminology? You've got, just as you described, you've got a procedure already that you verbally described to us on how you have the operator on call, contacted and activating the system, right? That's the thing that we've verbally heard. Now we want to see it written down.
Oh, so just that one thing, right? I think that's what I'm clarifying. Okay, right. I understand now. When
Okay.
I'm talking about the SOP, I'm thinking about all the things that it encompasses.
No, that-
One thing, that's why I'm like, I'm struggling to understand having everything sent to council on the 16th. Now I
no.
like,
Like
fine.
the process.
Yeah,
And the way I would do that is like, great, we can write that up, but that will be taken and put into the manual that will be in the passport. Like that'll be part of it. Okay. I think that's what I was confused with. So you just want this one thing and that will become another component of this.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if I might, Ian, I mean, the way I would visualize this, or the easiest way it seems to me to do it, is Chris, in your procedures, you would simply reference that there are a number of operational procedures that Belcarra employs.
No, I would
And
actually.
the reader should and the reader should reference those. So there may be 1, 2, 3, 4, ultimately 5. They can be produced administratively. They just are referenced in your work.
No, they would be in the folder. They would
That's fine. Yeah, and if you issue a new one, it also goes in. But I mean, your description simply says, you know, all the current procedures are in this manual. They consist of the following 6. And I don't think you have to write all 6. What you have to do is, obviously, this should be a first one, I think, because it will reassure council that in fact, it ought not to worry itself about the triggering of the inflow.
Yeah. Okay. Got you.
Okay, good. That's no further discussion needed then, I hope on that one. Okay, can we move on then to Stuart's report? I know we partly talked about it, but number 4 on the reports.
I don't know if there's anything else left to say other than I'll field more questions. You guys do see the procedures that are proposed that I'll send, that I will review with with Fraser Health. And after the review, then I guess I could report back to the water committee. There's a little bit, once again, you know, and I keep going to the water pressure and the fact that, you know, just raising the tank level is not going to solve the problems for the municipality. And in fact, as I said prior, you know, with just the monitor alone, flowing 1,060 liters per second, when we are getting readings of a maximum of 300 gallons per minute. So that's about 22 liters per second. If they're flowing that kind of volume, they're putting really the piping system in a potentially compromised situation, because it's going to be in negative pressure. And that's the reason why I keep pointing you back to dealing with the water pressure issues.
I think that's fair enough, and I would like to hear from other committee members, and okay, Martin?
Yeah, so as we pointed out before, Stuart, is that the water pressure system needs to be integrated in any upgrade of the water supply system for fire protection. That's for sure. It's the weak point in the village, which needs to be addressed. Then second is, I'll just reiterate my original point, is that low level setting, when the average water consumption was 0.5 liters per second, there's no logic in having the same low level setting when we are now several times that amount. I can't see the logic in that. So
just so I understand,
that needs to be addressed with Fraser Health.
Just so I understand that, Martin, are you saying because our flow rate is up substantially, there shouldn't be the same sensitivity as to what our minimum fill level is?
I would find it logical that that low level setting would need to follow the average consumption of the village. I like to get like Chris's opinion on that also. That's if the issue is recirculation of water in the tank as being the criteria, then it's just logical that that low level setting should be adjusted as our water consumption is increasing. Chris, do you have any other thoughts on that?
I hear where you're going with it, because you're looking at the turnover of water and the rate of turnover. So therefore, you've increased the amount going out. So therefore, the rate of turnover should increase at the same time.
Yeah.
We're hitting them right. Yeah. Yeah. Which makes logical sense. Totally.
And I agree with that. And that's kind of why really this is the first time where there's been a group of operators that has been receptive to raising the water level, albeit much slower than what everybody is hoping for.
Okay.
I think
Jim had something to say?
if I can suggest with Fraser Health, I wouldn't necessarily propose what could be considered an overly conservative value. I would rather put the question to Fraser Health, like we need to, or we would like to increase that lower level. Like how do we go about it? And explain to them what I just pointed out is that our average consumption has increased by many-fold in the last 10 years.
Right. Jim, you've had your hand up for a long time.
I think that Martin has explained most of it, but I mean, I think it's just as simple. Why can't we, when the day one we set the system up, they set the level. We have, as Martin pointed out, it's vastly more today. So why doesn't Chris just recalculate it the same way as Dayton and Knight did and reset the point? I mean, quite frankly, I don't think the health department's going to tell us how to do it. They will only look at the stats. It's not their job to tell us how to build a system or run it.
That's quite likely correct, because no authority wants to be responsible for designing a system. They tend to only say yes and cite.
That's why I was wondering what they got involved in the 2%, because I mean, we're not talking about 2% here. We're talking about 50% change, maybe even 100% or 200%. So I think Martin's right on the money, and I don't understand why we're not moving forward in that area. And I think, Bruce, you should be pressing this really hard, because this is your hot button to get us some more.
Yeah, just a moment, Jim, just to be clear, when you say 100%, 200%, we're talking about the increased use of water. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So because, and that's the point that that Martin has made, that we're using a lot more water than when the tank began. I do think it would be a good idea, as Martin suggested, to approach Fraser Health saying, we want to try raising this level, but I don't think I would give them a low ball number, because if you do, they'll be cautious and they'll buy that number. I mean, nobody is going to put water quality in jeopardy. I appreciate what you've already done, Stuart, in increasing the sampling. Obviously, we're going to watch the sampling closely. We're not going to delay to drop the refill level if we run into problems with our chlorine levels. We do it before Fraser Health told us. But I do think we should seek a higher rate of increase or a shorter time of testing. It just, I would let them impose and make a suggestion to us. And if they don't, I think we should be more aggressive in the change we're proposing.
Well, why wouldn't we do a calculation and say, look, we think it's safe to move it up maybe to 60% or 75%, and then see where we're going, rather than go. I wouldn't ask the health department how to do it. They're going to take your specifications and say, do you think you're reliable?
Yeah, I guess, Jim, I mean, it's a separate discussion, but I accept that the health, Fraser Health, as they ought to, is going to be very cautious. And I appreciate that what we do is under their authority. So I appreciate we need their blessing to do it. They should certainly be aware we're doing it. As to what level is safe, I mean, I'd leave that to Chris. If there's a theoretical calculation that might tell us we could safely do, something differently when we're draining 5 liters a second on average rather than half a liter. But if that's the case, then we'd present that to Fraser Health. Anyway, I accept that whatever they allow us to do, we should be doing.
Well, I mean, we did it once. All we're asking the engineer today, which is just a new gentleman, we should just recalculate it.
Well, I see. We calculated it once. I agree. I thought you were referring to having higher levels, but as Stuart pointed out to us, we never did have higher levels.
Well, I mean, there seems to be a mystery there, and there also seems to be a lack of data for the last years or 8 years. And I'm not sure, that's why I get worried about when somebody starts using the factor of 2%, I suspect we have no knowledge to even relate to that ratio.
And then maybe, actually, Stuart, maybe you could comment on just that. It seems to me that the 2%, I take it, is simply a very cautionary number. Is it? It's not based on any engineering, is it?
That's correct. And so I have to be very conservative. If we hire an engineer, for example, has to be hired because it has to be, the person has to submit a stamp. If they think or they feel that they have a calculation that will accommodate raising of the water level and maintaining it at that, I will submit it like any other permit. However, it is also variable, right? Water temperature affects the tank, or it affects the bacteria levels in the residual. So it is variable, and that's the reason why we were going year by year, because we have to see the full cycle, or at least that's what the water operators feel. But if there's an engineer that wants to put down a calculation and take charge of it and put their stamp on it, then that would be presented to Fraser Health as a permit.
Isn't that what we have Chris for?
I'm not going to take the liability of you guys altering all your system. Like it's engineers are very cautious folks, and if you want me to take that liability, I'll tell you now, I won't do it. Like it is way too much liability for me to take on a whole water system that I haven't designed. I don't know the ins and outs of all of it. Like,
Well, then maybe we should go back to Dayton tonight for this question.
sure, and I bet you they tell you the same thing, that at this point they're not going to do it either. Like you can ask them, but I doubt very much they will take on the liability of it.
Well, what about the fact that they did it the first time?
Well, it's because they designed the whole system at the first time, and I shouldn't smirk, but I tell you that they'll say back to you, no, stay with our original calculations. I'm not taking my any more liability, and pay me $5 grand for the excuse you're telling me that. Like that engineers are like they are risk averse. They will not push the limits.
I didn't say that. I just get a calculation.
Sure, I could do a calculation for you. So sorry, Martin, I can see you put your hand.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Like I could do a calculation, but I'm not going to then say to you, you should settle your system based on this. Like
Ian, just to help you out, you've got Martin on your right is put up a hand visually. You've got Bruce with the yellow hand up. So I don't know if you either want to go, and then I believe Stuart put his hand up too. Did you, Stuart?
I don't have any yellow hands here. I don't know what.
But Bruce has put his down now then. So
Okay.
you've got, I believe you've got Martin and Stuart online. Probably Martin, were you first? I think you were from.
It was, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be very short now. As far as, like we're centering on the unknown right now, like how was that initial level set? And that's a big unknown. And so everyone's a little uncomfortable with it. Jim, I don't believe that there's any calculations to be done. It's probably a rule of thumb, like I mentioned before. I'm just guessing. A rule of thumb got to do with the water consumption and the turnover in the tank. And then obviously you start out with that, and probably there's a trial period and a monitoring period, which comes over a period of whatever, 6 months or a year. I would not be surprised if that's the typical scenario. The Dayton Knight did not have that at all in their design information. as to the setting of that level. They just looked at it from a population growth in Belcarra from so many residents up to a maximum of 1,250 with an average consumption per resident. And so I don't know, it would be interesting to find out. I'm not sure, Chris, if you can get insight into just asking around as to how these initial settings are set, if you know any other, or just asking the question to Fraser Health, quite frankly.
Yeah, so I have a specialist in the company to talk to for sure. And like I said, they could give you a number, but then saying for ourselves to put that number and bet our lives on it, like and send it in. It's
Agreed. Like agreed. It's not a black and white, and then you say it's this amount, but that's all in discussions with Fraser Health. I'd like to. I would suggest asking the question to Fraser Health, how are these initial settings set in the first place? They may turn back and say, well, it's the engineer which provides that, and then the onus is on the initial design engineer. I do not know. It's possible that Fraser Health participate in that discussion as to the setting of that low level point or the turnover rate in the tank.
Stuart, you had something to
contribute? Well, I just wanted to add to what both Martin and Chris were saying, and that is, there are so many variables with it, and there has to be a large cushion for the tank once again, because those variables can be the heat on the tank, like the sunny days, that spikes up the the bacteria count, and also contrary, and the fluctuation of the water that we're using from month to month. I know we are year over year in generally going up. The last 2 months of like November and December, we were actually lower than the last three, I think about the last 3 years, equal to or lower in consumption. So consumption, water temperature, it all plays a factor. You need a very large cushion on that tank of chlorine. That's the reason why we're going slow without any kind of engineering permit. If you guys want to go that way. Of course, there's also adding a chlorination system to the system without even, without addressing all the other issues. There's always chlorination of the existing system that we have. Once again, that's only partial fix.
Might I just comment briefly through the chair? It seems to me what's been described or proposed by Stuart is consistent with what Martin described as the probable process by which these are done. And I think it also relates to Chris's comment. Chris indicates that he doesn't want to put his name on a specific number because engineers wisely, when we think of buildings in Florida, are risk adverse. So, but at the same time, Chris, I take it you would agree that that the comment that typically these systems are just rule of thumb, and then you measure carefully what your experience is over a set period of time, obviously watching carefully as to assure yourself that your water quality didn't suffer from the settings that you established. Is that correct?
Yeah, 100%, because the rule of thumb is based on an average consumption, right? And that's
Sure.
just you base your reservoir on 5 liters per second, but they're always theoretical. And then
Sure.
you start the system, they're down to only 3 liters a second. You're like, oh, well, that isn't what I kind of based it on. So operators will then kind of look and tinker with the system to get it in a nice balanced fashion, which is what Stuart's now tinkering with, but he's tinkering the other way to go, okay, let's see what.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly my point. So what you are comfortable with is exactly what Stuart is recommending, is that take a cautious measure, adjust it, watch it very carefully, and then if you want to make another adjustment, make that. But rather than doing a theoretical calculation as to how much could you in fact employ.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you very much.
So the one thing, sorry, this might be off the topic a little bit here. You keep on talking about consumption's growing. Has anyone started to be like, why is it growing so much more? And are we starting to tackle that issue? Because to me, that's one of the, like, I don't know the doctrine of this committee, but I hear that and I kind of think, man, you might want to start getting on a metering program or starting to really monitor the consumption.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way you can start figuring this out. Like if it keeps on continuing, like if you have a bunch of leaks, how are you ever going to find out and detect them?
Yeah, that's a separate topic, but yeah, you're correct. And it is something the council's looking at.
Yeah, we're also considering that exact possibility. You know, there's huge consumption increases, but there's also the chance that there are leaks. So we shouldn't be operating on one plane or the other, right?
Yeah.
So, Martin?
Martin, you got something?
Yeah, like we looked at that and we turned around in circles for quite a while, and we were trying to focus on the SCADA data to try and get that information out of SCADA, and it's just it's too difficult, let's say. And so what was done a couple of years ago, what we did, and it's probably a practical approach on how to go about it, is you have the monthly water deliveries from District of North Vancouver on a monthly basis. And from that, we calculated the monthly average based on this water. And then we trended that over 3 years. And you can see very clearly in the winter months, it always falls back to the same level. So it kind of, and Stuart, I believe that you mentioned this in one of the meetings several months ago. In winter, it stays pretty much constant. It's in the summer months. You see it spike, and every year that spike is getting higher and higher. So it kind of suggests that it's probably not a leak. It's just more consumption of people having watering systems or water fountains, and not, you know, it's these type of issues. So it's all in the data. This data needs to be looked at and tabled, and it will, I'm sure it will shed quite a lot of light.
You know what it probably is then? If only summer months you're doing this continually and the peak's getting higher and higher, it's the irrigation systems, and irrigation systems probably have cracks in them.
Yeah.
And it goes back down to normals because people turn off the irrigation system and blow them out for the winter. Stop the leak on that side. So that's why you probably have.
Now, I like Stuart, if you're interested, I'll send you these graphs. I have the graphs of I can't recall 3 consecutive years, and you see the trend. And so it will just give you a hint as to maybe going out and getting more data, and it would definitely give some insight.
Okay. Is there any more discussion on this point? I guess where are we going to go with Stuart's report, or is there any comments further?
If I might, Ian.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to see Stuart's written report. I think the numbers are modest, but I understand the rationale from him and from Chris. This would in fact be the first time we've raised that lower level. 2% with no professional qualification whatsoever. 2% seems very low to me in terms of an increase, but I appreciate the wish for caution. And as long as we're making that adjustment, and as long as we're satisfied that pushing beyond that might be a risk, I'd be prepared to accept it as one initial step. That plus the triggering of inflow, if we're satisfied that that is always happening when we have a call out that it reasonably could be taken to be fire related. Those 2 steps together make it very unlikely that we would hit the scenario where we would have less water than we did when the Turtlehead fire started. I appreciate that's an odd metric to use, but it's the most dramatic fire we've ever had. It's the biggest drain we ever had on the system. And so it's one that we pay close attention to. Ostensibly, you could end up at exactly that level with those 2 steps, but you're much more likely to be higher than that. So I would accept both are less than I would like, but I appreciate the rationale, and I particularly like the fact that we've finally got a written description and rationale of what's proposed. So I'm quite prepared to see both of those come back to council personally, but I'm not your committee, so I'll be quiet at this point.
Okay, I had one question on that I'd like an explanation of opinion number 3 that Stuart put forward. I'm not quite sure what that, is there more designs happening here or what?
Could you read the first little bit just so I know?
Engineered structural change. Multiple designs are available, which may include additional higher reservoir tanks, pump stations, or combination of both.
Yeah, well, that was exactly what Martin Dubois and Chris have been talking about. Improving the design of the system in order to actually meet your needs. And that it would include either an additional reservoir, a higher reservoir, or both, you know, because obviously if you're not raising the height and going by gravity fed system, you're going to need some sort of pumping system. And, you know, that is very common for other municipalities to have pump stations to boost pressure in the system.
Okay. Okay, I wasn't just sure how that fit in to raising the water level in top of the tank. That those are other
Yes, that's correct.
issues that we're gonna have to deal with.
That's correct.
obviously.
I put that in because and I know I'm repeating myself, because raising the water level of even if you raise it to 100%, that's going to be like 4 psi.
What?
From the low and the high. It's not enough.
It's nothing.
And to service St. Clair and all the upper low pressure areas.
Where's the low at St. Clair?
Okay, because I think, as I said initially, there's multiple issues that are happening within the system, and you know, we're looking for water for firefighting, and of course you're identifying low pressure areas in the system, and so I just wasn't sure that how this report would be fit into the discussions with the Fraser Health people.
Can I kind of just freelance a little bit and say a little bit more, if I may, you know, and about firefighting strategy and tactics, and how you know, there's what's called tactical water supply. When your department will assess the hazards and balance that against your, you know, what you have for resources, including water, areas of water, the capabilities of your firefighters. And of course, what happened back then on Turtlehead, they weren't aware about the need to conserve water. From what I understand, I wasn't there, but this is what the other water operators have told me. And if you think about it mathematically, it 100% makes sense, because you're almost getting 60 liters per second. If that, you know, if we bump up the water tank, that's 58,000 gallons. So that's 1,000 gallons a minute for 1 hour. Plus, you know, what the system is being replenished. If they are aware, now, once again, now they probably will never come into that situation on the low end if they're aware of their water reserves and they're taking advantage of any other types of systems that they may have in their resources. However, on St. Clair, you know, they were talking about the lack of water. and they thought that the tank was running down. Well, Brad insists that the tank was never empty. And that would also make sense, because if you're trying to pump 60 liters per second and you're only getting 20 liters per second out of the water lines, it's going to make them feel they're gonna believe that they're out of water, and then they have to stop. They have to stop because they think they're out of water, when actually they're just drawing way too much water from what the system is capable of supplying.
I would think that that's an engineering issue with our system. I don't know what's causing that, but that's,
Lack of head in the system.
yeah.
It's because the reservoir isn't high enough. It's like Stu keeps saying, there's a direct correlation between flow and pressure, right? And there isn't enough pressure, and so therefore it cannot provide enough flow out of the end of the hydrant. Right? That's the issue. And so if you move your reservoir higher, you then automatically get more head, because head's direct relation to height. And so the higher it is up the mountain, the more pressure you have in your system, and the more force it has to push more water out of the system. And so what Stuart keeps saying is, I'm going into the details with sinking fire, but he's probably right. If the thing can only provide 25 liters a second and they're trying to suck out 60, the pumps will start cavitating and saying they can't do it because it's run out of water. But in fact, it can never produce 60 liters a second because the system simply can't supply it.
It's Bruce here. I think we should be careful speculating as to what happened on St. Clair without involving the fire department. My understanding was that, in fact, they were being told to shut down the pumps periodically based on what our employee was seeing in terms of the levels in the tanks. But you'd have to ask the fire department what. But I mean, what I'm hearing from the fire department is they were being told to shut down while we watched the water level. SCADA system said that we dropped as low as 36% of the tank.
Right.
So I don't know what happens when you have a monitor, which I gather has its own pump, drawing from too low a pressure. Obviously, it can only get so much water, which I think is the point you're making. And so, but I don't recall anyone on the fire department, and maybe Doug could comment, I don't recall any of them saying that we had too low a flow when we had our pumps on. They were being told to shut them off periodically.
Okay, Martin, you have something to say?
Yeah, no, it's just like a general comment there on the pressure. So yes, it is a deficiency, if I can use the term deficiency, on our current system, and it needs to be dealt with sooner or later. That's for sure. There are solutions to that, and there's various alternatives. It just needs to be like looked at, like additional booster pumps is one of them, of course. But obviously, as I had written in that article over a year ago, it will most likely, depending on the location, but like backup generator and electricity and everything, and costs really start to escalate. But there are different ways of dealing with it, which could be explored by Chris.
Right. Okay, well, I see we've got about 5 minutes left before our time was supposed to be finished. So do we have anything else to cover, or do we want to, I think this table of contents and the manual and stuff, I see it's on the agenda, but I'm not sure we're ready to talk about it, are we? I think Chris understands now, I hope, the fact that the SOP manual that we're looking for is how to run this combined system. We know that the water operators know how to run their part of the system, but the problem is we've got this dual function. And that's what that manual was visualized to contain. And I thought there's a lot of questions that we can't find answers for. Maybe there's data, maybe there isn't. And in the process of writing this SOP manual, perhaps some of this information would come out as to how the firefighting component fits into the overall operating of the system. So that was the purpose. So we haven't seen, we've got your, what do you call it? Standard operating procedures for the Tatlow pump station. So that is, but I don't know if that's the complete, where do the valves fit in and things like that? Are these the components? Or how this all blends together? Obviously, we've had quite a discussion today, so that's more information.
So on my PDF here, I just added in the line emergency firefighting procedure. So, I'm going to put that in there, and that involves the valves and all the other bits and pieces, the actuator valve, right? Like procedures talking about that's very straightforward. And that is a good thing to have in the standard operating procedure. That's fine, but no issues with it being in there. It seems like a good logical thing to have in there for sure.
Okay, good. And that can be a standalone document to begin with, right? And just add in?
Well, I wouldn't start having more than one operating procedure. I'd keep it as one operating procedure because that opening of the valves is part of the Tatlow pump station, right? And I think, the reservoir. And so obviously that's like the important piece here that I was missing was that I thought you wanted an SOP and then another SOP and another SOP, all these different things. But in reality, it's one SOP, and this is just one section of the SOP.
Yeah.
Exactly, okay.
And so that'll just stay within this SOP document. So we'll write that up and send it in for you guys. But ultimately, I don't want it to have a separate SOP and another SOP over here. Because then he's into which SOP was I supposed to be reading during this emergency? It should just be one document that you pick up and know what's.
No, that's good. Okay. Does anybody else have any points on that? Okay, so I don't know if what I got here. Is it 5A? Will the manual recognize fire flow as one of the two purposes of the water system? And I think the answer is yes on that one.
Yeah.
Okay. And number 6, then, if we move ahead, the Dutchman's Creek Reservoir, is it available for shuttling water? And I think that, unfortunately, during the fire, the water hadn't been emptied out and cleaned, so the tank was not used by the fire department at that time because they couldn't be assured of condition of the water.
Yeah, and I think if I might add that, that's just one more example of one of the procedures that will have to do with firefighting, right? It has nothing to do with potable water, but it's one of maybe 4 or 5 procedures that we would have, and which would relate to how often that tank is tested, how often we replace the water, how often we inspect the tank, that sort of thing, that just gives us high assurance that it is always available for the fire department. And, as was commented earlier, the fire department, knowing that we have challenges with respect to fire flow, is likely to begin shuttling water immediately that they come to a fire in Belcarra, and that's an obvious spot to draw it.
Right. Okay. Stuart, I see you had a hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that the tank is full. It's checked and topped up if necessary, which it actually is fairly stable. It doesn't leak any water or anything. The hydrant itself is maintained as per all the rest of the hydrants in the municipality. And as far as procedures about using it, once again, that's all 100% up to the tactics of the fire department on whether they incorporate the use of it or not.
Part of the problem, Stuart, if I just might comment though, part of the problem in talking to the chief in Anmore, and this is normal between organizations, right? They were just not confident, as Ian suggested, they were not confident given a past experience they'd had using that tank, that we had in fact cleaned the water, we're pumping water up into it, and that it was in fact clean, usable water. They had had an experience where we actually damaged some of their equipment because there was grit in the water in that tank, long before your time. But they continued to believe that to be the case, just because we hadn't communicated effectively with them that the situation had changed.
Okay, and again, ultimately, we'd be looking for documentation. This is just another procedure.
Yep.
That's being followed and recorded somehow into the system that it was done, so. But that would be the sort of procedure we'd be looking for. Is there any other comments on that?
Well, I think Bruce made a good point. There was in the past year before your time, but if we get this written down, he gets it established, the good things that are there. And then we actually get the chief and the 2 assistant chiefs to come and be able to have a look around. And then there's that confidence level. So that documentation and that part, but you know, they're always going to err on the side of protecting things if they're not sure, right? And what we need them to protect is all our people and our structures, right? So
And if we're checking the tank and we're checking the hydrant, just as a matter of course, we could just send a note to the chief saying that it has been done. It would just keep them constantly reminded that the system is there and it's usable.
Okay. All right, and the last item, I not quite described current testing referenced at council. I'm not sure what that in fact would be as a discussion. I
don't know, Ian, but it might refer to the testing of the tank at Dutchman's Creek. Because at various times I have referred to that simply because of my experience with the fire department administration. So if we have a process that says this is how often it's tested, this is when it was last tested, and we let them know it's happened, I think we can be very confident they will, with confidence, make use of it when they have a call out.
Okay, that's good then. Okay, well, I guess that's pretty well the end of the agenda. So I guess, is there anything further anybody wants to add to this, or are we done?
I'd just like to come back to my suggestion if somebody is interested though, or Stuart, since you're part of staff, do you want me to send you that what we collected as to the average daily demand over 3 consecutive years? I can send you a copy of that. And also I just found the source email, which explains how the data was generated.
Certainly couldn't hurt. I'd happily accept any additional information I can receive.
Okay, I'll send you a copy, and I'll put Ian and Bruce in CC, or anybody
Yes,
else.
please.
Thanks, that'd be great.
Should I put Chris in CC, Lorna, or?
Well,
I can't hear you.
Sorry, yes, if you'd CC me too, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, and I'll put Chris also, or?
Sure.
Okay, so Chris, Lorna, Ian, and Bruce. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Well, okay, thanks for everybody coming on this nice hot afternoon.
Yeah.
So I think we'll adjourn the meeting now. Everybody can go out in the hot sun.
Good job, Ian, 5:04 p.m.
Thank you,
Ian.
Ian.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for coming. Great.
Yeah, take care, everybody. Enjoy the heat.